Hello, it's the start of a new year, and that's a good time to look ahead and consider what issues the CI is likely to be involved in over the next 12 months. Of course, however we might plan, we know that God is the only one who is truly in control. As it says in Proverbs 19, many are the plans in a man's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. Now, having said that, humanly speaking, there are a whole host of matters that will need our attention in 2026. Joining me in the studio to consider some of them are the Institute's Simon Calvert and Dave Greatorex. Let's go straight into it, guys. The big thing for 2026, as has been for 2025, is assisted suicide. Let's start with Westminster. We've got Kim Leadbeater's bill and more than 1,000 amendments at the Lords. Dave, just talk us through briefly how we've got to this position and why the Lords holds such an important role in dealing with what is, let's be honest, a pretty terrible bill.
Yeah, so the bill spent, the first chunk of last year passing through the House of Commons. Its second reading was at the end of 2024, and then it had its committee stage in the Commons. And remember, at that committee stage, there was a key amendment made that Kim Leadbeater moved away from her ultimate safeguard.
The High Court judge.
Exactly right. To sign off on assisted suicides, and instead moved it over to a panel system. And that is still something that the Lords are considering. So the amendments considered just last week to revert back to a judicial role within the bill. And that shows that even at this point, after months and months of scrutiny, fundamental, very basic questions about how the bill should be framed are still being considered. And the widespread concern amongst peers that this bill is not fit for purpose, and that really the Lords have been landed with the job of fixing something the Commons didn't properly scrutinise.
The big question for many people is going to be, will it make it through to May?
Yeah, so the end of session will be April, May time, and if the bill doesn't pass by then it will fall. And
can be brought back as a government bill next year. I mean, there's been public, more than speculation, but really sort of evidence to suggest that really it was a Labour Party, it was a government bill, but being put through as a private member's route.
And these are questions that are very difficult to answer. In the normal course of events, the bill wouldn't have time to go through, but this bill has already seen very unusual opportunities given to it that normally a private member's bill would not be given. We saw 2 days of second reading in the Lords, the second day being a day had been scheduled as a recess day, but that holiday for peers was shortened in order to facilitate second reading. And so, although the government is still saying they're not going to give any government time to this bill, there are ongoing efforts to try and get more and more time for the Lords to scrutinise it. But obviously others are saying no time will be enough to fix the bill.
Yeah, so on that point, I mean, there's a lot of things to get through, but as I said, this is the big issue, really. There's two sides to a debate going on here, isn't there? Because there's Lord Falconer, who's championing it in the Lords, is saying it's a disgrace, and there's others, it's a disgrace that the House of Lords is spending so much time talking about this, debating it, putting down so many amendments. And on the other side of the debate, people like Baroness Gray-Thompson are saying, well, it was a terrible bill when it came to the Lords. MPs were saying, as you mentioned, we'll look to the Lords to sort it out. There's so many problems with it. It needs a fundamental rewrite. We are doing our job.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need to be clear on that this is what peers are doing. They have this important constitutional role to scrutinise legislation. And with the expertise that there is in the Lords, which is across the spectrum, they're applying proper, rigorous scrutiny. And that didn't happen in the Commons. And we said at the time that there's completely inadequate scrutiny in the Commons. And what we're seeing now is scrutiny that should have happened earlier. And people have made the point, rightly, I think, that this didn't even have pre-legislative scrutiny. There was no public consultation. So all of that work that would have been done in advance on a normal piece of legislation, say a government bill, is now having to be done in the Lords. And it's not that the Lords are dragging their feet. They're not putting down unreasonable amendments. They're putting down important points of discussion and debate that need to be thought about.
And we will have to continue. Sorry, Simon. We will have to continue to keep in touch with our supporters over the course of this debate. I know there's been lots of contact already, but there is going to be more to come because it's so important that public pressure rolls in behind the Lords who are seeking to turn this around. Simon, go on.
Yeah, I mean, this is not just about running down the clock. This is, as Dave says, about actually properly scrutinising the bill, asking the questions that should have been asked before now, and exposing the real problems with the bill. So I think the idea that you're getting pressure from the other side who's saying, don't talk too much about the bill. I think that it's not just a cynical attempt by them to just, avoid the scrutiny and get the bill on the statute book. I think it may reveal a lack of confidence on their part. It is a bad bill. Yeah. I mean, you haven't got Royal Colleges who back this bill, but you've got several who oppose it, the bill, at least in this form. You don't have any disability groups that support this bill, but you have plenty that oppose it. I mean, there are huge problems. And I mean, Lord Falconer, when I see him sort of squealing about the idea that the House of Lords is scrutinising this bill and that it has no right to do this, when he himself has been involved in the past in trying to block bills that have come up from the Commons, I think there's a double standard at play. So, we have to hope and indeed pray that members of the House of Lords keep their nerve and focus on the issues that they want to raise and that they get the time to properly ask those questions. And I think that if they do that, whether or not the bill runs out of time, and I think it probably will, I think the more important thing that it will do is that it will make it impossible for the other side to advance this bill or any bill like it, because it will expose all the problems that it throws up.
Yeah, the exposure has been really, really good. Well, we operate, of course, as you know, across the UK and the Republic of Ireland. So we're going to be talking about all the areas over the course of our bit of time today. Assisted suicide is very much on the agenda in Holyrood and Scotland as well. What's the position there, Dave?
So obviously the parliamentary process is different in Scotland, and there's just one chamber. It had its debate, which is like the principal debate, earlier in 2025, and was passed narrowly by 70 votes to 56. Then it moved to stage 2, where it was scrutinised in more detail by the committee, and amendments were made, or proposed at least, and only a small number were made. And Liam MacArthur, the member leading the bill there, played a prominent role in rejecting many reasonable amendments that would have at least tried to shave the rougher edges off.
As Kim Leadbeater had done exactly the same as she'd done in Westminster.
And now we're awaiting a date for stage 3, which is the final opportunity for the whole chamber of the Scottish Parliament to consider probably a small number of amendments and then vote again on should this bill be approved.
And it's been said that as bad as the Westminster bill is, that there are certainly aspects of Liam MacArthur's bill that are even worse.
That's right. Not least the fact that the Leadbeater bill has a 6-month prognosis requirement. That's missing from the MacArthur bill, so that someone who has a terminal illness, they could still have decades left to live, yet they would be eligible for assisted suicide under the MacArthur bill.
So Scotland and Westminster, assisted suicide is a UK issue at the moment, and we'll keep you up to date on what's going on and be asking for your help at various stages throughout the processes in both Westminster and Holyrood. I want to turn now to some legal matters. We've got 2 huge cases going on at the moment, amongst many other things in our legal area. Simon, let me turn to you. Let's start with Clive. Pastor Clive Johnston, arrested for preaching the gospel, from preaching from John 3:16 in one of these abortion censorship zones that are around, making it really clear, wasn't talking about abortion, didn't mention abortion. Tell us what the situation is there. He's going to be back in court at the end of March. Bring people up to speed, and what can we expect to happen in March?
So March 31st, there'll be a morning hearing back there at Coleraine Magistrates Court. But what the judge has done is he's invited the lawyers on both sides to make written submissions, and that's taking place January, February, March. And that's a chance to have the argument, as it were, on paper. So that hearing on the 31st of March will be a chance for the barristers then to make oral submissions to the judge. And then the judge, he could give the ruling on the day. I suspect he'll probably want to go away and think about it. But, I mean, we're in a good position as far as that trial goes. Clive gave evidence in December, and I mean, I sat next to him, you know, and watched him then when he stepped up to give his evidence. And it was just really encouraging to see how his Christian character shone through and how consistent he was in his testimony. The other thing that happened in court was the prosecution played the police body-worn camera footage of this sort of half-an-hour conversation between the cops who turned up and Clive. And again, it warmed your heart to see how gracious he was towards them, how completely consistent he was in everything he said. And it was slightly comical at the end after they'd told him that he was going to be prosecuted. He shook their hand and thanked them for how kind they were to him. So, you know, all of that kind of came across in the evidence that he gave. Some of the prosecution's evidence kind of fell apart. They tried to claim that there were abortion placards there. Of course, there weren't, because this was just an open-air service about John 3:16. So, you know, there won't be any more evidence at the hearing in March. It will just be legal submissions, and then, you know, we'll have to wait and see. And our supporters might remember that as well as acquitting or convicting Clive, a third option for the judge that we've been advocating is that the judge refer the case to the Court of Appeal, to a higher court, for a ruling on whether using the abortion buffer zones legislation in this way to target gospel preaching is human rights compliant.
Yeah, so this is not just about Clive, and Clive has been really clear about that himself. There are far wider implications for this, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. If you can take a law designed to stop abortion protests and just decide, oh no, it also stops you from preaching John 3:16, that's a terrible thing. And it's hard to kind of work out what police and prosecutors have in mind. Are they trying to sort of impute a motive? You know, what's the win for them? What's the win for them out of you know, if they succeed in this case? I think it's a very bad look. And, you know, as people have said, it's almost as if the Bible itself is on trial. Mm-hmm. The idea that a pure gospel service, an open-air service that says nothing about abortion, there are no abortion placards, is not wearing an anti-abortion badge. There's literally zero content that relates to the issue of abortion. You know, if it's just kind of a law against being pro-life in a public place, you know, how wide do they want to apply this law?
Although, I mean, there's cases which we haven't got time to get into, which sort of suggests that in terms of Isabel Vaughan Spruce and so on.
Exactly.
We have repeatedly said, and will continue to say, that, or stress, the freedom to preach the gospel in public. And if you aren't aware of it already, we recently produced the Street Preachers Charter, touches on abortion censorship zones, but there's a whole lot more in there as well. It gives great advice for people who do go out on the streets in terms of practical advice about what to do, what the law allows you to do, which is a lot, where there are some restrictions, which are few, and it's important to go about any street preaching in a winsome and gracious way. We are, of course, representing the Lord Jesus Christ when we do it. So commend this to you. If you haven't had a chance to look at it already, it's available on our website. Let's move on, because the other big case, not an individual in this sense, but very significant, is the legal action that we have raised with against the civil service for its endorsement of LGBT pride, the fact that its endorsement of LGBT breaches rules on impartiality. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so this is a case where the Christian Institute is the client. We are bringing the legal action in our own name, and we're bringing it on the basis that to have civil servants being paid and equipped by the taxpayers' expense with pride banners to turn up to pride marches is clearly a breach of the law on civil service impartiality.
It's there in black and white, isn't it, in the code?
It seems very clear to me, and I think it's a strong legal case. I mean, if civil servants want to turn up in their own time and at their own expense to take part in the Pride March, then that is their right.
Yeah, that's one of the sort of the misnomers that's been doing around on social media about what this case is about, as if it sort of stops people doing it at all.
Yeah.
It doesn't do that.
Yeah, anybody can go on any kind of march or protest that they like. But if you're a civil servant, should you expect that the civil service will encourage you to go and pay for you to go and equip you to go? I think not. And I mean, you only have to think of other causes. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the March for Jesus, and I think they still have them in some parts of the world. The idea that I would expect the civil service to email everybody in the civil service and say, come along to a March for Jesus. You can go on work time. We'll give you a T-shirt to wear that says Civil Service March for Jesus. I would just never expect that in a million years. But that is the way things work at the moment when it comes to Pride. So I think it's a strong case. Of course, the backdrop to it was the successful case brought by Lindsay Smith.
Yes, because that's true. Just interrupt you, because the important point there is some people might be asking the question, why now? And the answer to the why now is this.
Yes, that Lindsay Smith brought a case against Northumbria Police for their active participation in the Pride March, and the court was persuaded that Pride was a political movement, and that by having police officially taking part in it on behalf of the police, that it compromised their impartiality.
Great. Okay, again, we've got so many things to get through. Let's move on. Conversion therapy. Simon, we sat here this time last year and you said you expected the draft bill to be published early in 2025. I mean, this was first talked about 2018 under Theresa May when she was Prime Minister. Is it too much to hope that it's gone away?
Yes. I mean, to be fair to me, I was saying I expected it in early 2025 because that's what the government kept saying. The fact that we've got through another year and they haven't produced this draft bill for pre-legislative scrutiny, which we can come back to, but this draft bill, it just indicates the reality of the situation. That for all the rhetoric, legislating to make it illegal for churches to preach and pray and pastor in accordance with their beliefs, legislating in a way which would jeopardize the ability of parents to raise their children in the faith, or indeed for non-Christian parents to discourage their kids from going on puberty blockers or whatever. The idea that you can legislate to stop that is so shocking, so appalling. And I think that the government and civil servants are just finding it impossible to deliver. However, they keep saying that they will bring forward a draft bill, and that will allow an opportunity for the House of Lords and the House of Commons to see the colour of their money before you get into the business of actually debating a bill that's going to become law. So even if they do produce a draft bill, it's not by any means the end of the argument. There'll be an opportunity for us to get House of Lords, get MPs, get peers to really look at the wording, get legal advice, and I think just pull at the threads. And like other issues that we work on, I always say that on this issue, time and scrutiny are our friends, because the more people look at the reality of what a legislative conversion therapy ban would do, the less inclined they are to support it.
In so much of legislation, Dave, Simon, you know this so well, wording is so absolutely crucial. So you've talked about there the difficulty of, and the lawyers have been heavily involved and given advice about how near impossible, if not impossible, it's going to be to get correct wording. But that applies elsewhere as well. So I want to turn now to hate crime and start off with the discussion about a new definition around Islamophobia. Let me just... the BBC at the end of last year said that they had seen a form of words that were being considered. Let me just read it. It's quite long, but it's worth reading it out. The draft definition is anti-Muslim hostility is engaging in or encouraging criminal acts, including acts of violence, vandalism of property, and harassment and intimidation, whether physical, verbal, written, or electronically communicated, which is directed at Muslims or those perceived to be Muslims because of their religion, ethnicity, or appearance. And this is kind of the really interesting bit. It is also the prejudicial, stereotyping, and racialization of Muslims as part of a collective group with set characteristics to stir up hatred against them, irrespective of their actual opinions, beliefs, or actions as individuals. It is engaging in prohibited discrimination where the relevant conduct, including the creation or use of practices and biases within institutions, is intended to disadvantage Muslims in public and economic life. Quite a lot in there, certainly a lot longer than the previous definition, which is the Labour Party definition still. And a lot of words which at face value, if you kind of skim through it, Dave, it all sounds very kind of reasonable and what have you. This is we're trying to stop a particular segment of society being attacked. But then you look at words like prejudicial stereotyping, racialization, stirring up. You start to see the elements of vagueness which various people, including ourselves, are concerned about. Let's just remind everybody, is it or is it not a criminal offence to stir up religious hatred?
It is. It is.
Is it or is it not unlawful for employers or service providers to discriminate against people on the basis of their religion or belief?
Certainly is.
So what is, given that's already the case, what is it that this set of words is changing? What's the need for it? What do we need to be concerned about?
Well, these are the fundamental questions, aren't they? And I mean, we need to be clear that at the moment, what is being proposed here is a non-statutory definition. I mean, there obviously, as is clear from that, they've moved away from the word Islamophobia. But as you've articulated, the point is, what is it trying to catch? And it's still trying to catch, it seems, what we would have thought was previously under this heading of Islamophobia. And it's just incredibly vague. So it's non-statutory. It's going to be used maybe within government to decide which groups they will engage with and which groups they won't. But obviously that has an important influence on, you know, who has a say, who can contribute to some of these public debates. And if you're deemed to infringe this definition, then you would be, you know, cut off. You'd be beyond the pale. They wouldn't be able to engage with you. So it is nonetheless important. The independent group has, we understand, proposed this form of words, maybe as long ago as October, but it seems as though the government is sitting on it. I think that news report you cited there suggested that it had been about to be published, but then there were the attacks in Australia, the Bondi Beach attacks, and that put this on the back burner somewhat. So we're still waiting to actually formally see what the government is proposing in this area. But the concern is that even if it starts out as a non-statutory definition, it could become something more legislative in the future, with the chilling effect on free speech that many people expect.
And that comes from non-statutory definitions anyway, doesn't it?
That's right, especially,
the chilling
as
effect
we've said, people being cut out of the debate, and you don't want to be seen to fall foul of it and be labelled in that way, whether Islamophobic or hatred of Muslims or hostility towards Muslims, whatever they eventually describe it as. It cuts you off from engaging in public debate.
It's one of the fundamental concerns for Christians is if you preach that Jesus Christ is the only way to God, that potentially you could fall foul of this.
Yeah, and being deemed to be a racist, that's the racialization it's getting at there. So it's not just that you are disagreeing with someone's religious beliefs, you are deemed to be racist.
Even though Islam isn't a...
Yeah.
Muslims are not a race.
Yeah.
Just to make the obvious point, I suppose. Let's talk about non-crime hate incidents and perhaps hate crime more widely as well. You've done a massive amount of work on this in recent weeks, Dave, so there's no one better to talk about this. There seems to be a little bit of a shift around NCHIs.
That's right. So obviously we've been concerned for some time about these incidents and the way in which they're being recorded and potentially showing up on DBS checks and so on. Even though nothing has actually happened, essentially. No crime has been committed. It's purely on the basis of someone's reporting and perception that it was a hate-based incident. It's not just us that has concerns and has had concerns for a long period of time, and various groups have been campaigning against them. And now we're seeing that those concerns are reaching police bodies, and we're expecting or it's widely expected that the Home Office is going to accept a recommendation from the National Police Chiefs Council that non-crime hate incidents should no longer be recorded. So we heard that the Met Police are going to stop investigating them, but they were going to continue recording. But this would be a step away from NCHIs altogether into an entirely new system, which is very welcome. Yes, we certainly hope that the Home Office will adopt that recommendation.
Lord MacDonald, Ken MacDonald, has been conducting a pretty rapid, I think sort of 6 weeks or so, review into hate crime more generally. Do you think that's going to shift the dial one way or the other on either or both of these issues?
Well, I mean, his review is very broad. So it's hate crime and public order. So it's looking at all sorts of issues.
Marches and so on.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, he certainly has his work cut out to do it in the time frame that's been mentioned. I think the government have been talking about potentially reporting in February. It's a lot of ground for him to cover. We're certainly hopeful that Lon McDonald has good instincts. He's been very pro free speech over the years, and we think he's very concerned about some of the language in the law that we're concerned about, language around alarm and distress and so on. Not that we think that people should be going around causing alarm or distress, but sometimes in the culture we're in, those words are
weaponized, really, aren't they?
They're weaponized, that's right. And so if you are preaching the gospel, then you could be deemed to be alarming or distressing. And so there's a dangerous threshold for the law to be setting for some of these offences. And so we do hope that there will be a narrowing of the law.
Okay, thanks. Let's move on again, as I keep saying, so much to get through. Simon, one of the very sad features of 2025 was the push towards pretty much full decriminalisation of abortion. There's some nuance there, but in general terms, it's what people would recognise as pretty much full decriminalisation of abortion. Crime policing bill has been going through. That's going to affect it. Up in Scotland, there's reports into decriminalising abortion there. Just tell us that, because so many of our supporters are going to be deeply concerned and upset and appalled, really, at the shift in direction or the movements in recent months.
Yeah, so the backbench amendment in the House of Commons to decriminalise women completely in relation to abortion, that went through in the House of Commons, I think, after a sort of 45-minute debate or something like that. So, I mean, you think about that. It's a huge shift morally as well as politically and legally in our policy. And that's all the debate that MPs are prepared to give it. If you're going to do something like that, you should at least have the decency to do it as a separate standalone bill, have the consultation, have all the consideration of all the issues. They didn't do that. The House of Lords has an opportunity to remove that amendment if they want to. I think it's going to be very difficult, because abortion is, frankly, just one of those issues where people aren't rational. People aren't rational. A lot of people are just not prepared to talk about the real issues. They're not prepared to talk about what they're really doing. And any opposition to a pro-abortion point of view is written off as extreme and so forth. So I think it's going to be very difficult. However, what's interesting is that since that amendment went through, you have seen some people who do support abortion who have said, I don't support this amendment, or at least I don't support the way it's being done. And some surprising people have come forward with concerns about what it means. Similarly, when the Scottish Government commissioned group produced this report in Scotland calling for total decriminalisation, doctors to be able to sign off on abortions up to birth, no protections for sex-selective abortions, so more girls being aborted than boys.
Which is a real issue.
Which is a real issue. Again, the reaction to that has brought some people out of the woodwork who are basically pro-abortion, but are saying, I am not prepared to go to these extremes. So I think we can be thankful that there is a sense of overreach here, which I think is provoking some people to think. And I think we have to pray that those of us who do care for the unborn can find ways of explaining what's at stake that do cut through and that do get to people. And particularly, I don't think those Scottish proposals are going to go anywhere very soon, but I think the debate in the House of Lords in the early part of this year, there is an opportunity there, and we need to hope and pray that somehow we can get some traction for our concerns about that.
Okay, well, I'm going to come back to you guys in just a few minutes, but you can take a bit of a rest while we invite in our Head of Education, John Denning, who is going to take us through some of the issues that is going to be affecting education. John, thanks for coming in. I want to start with the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill, a phenomenally broad bill. We've been talking about incredibly broad legislation already. In a in a nutshell, can you break down what our interest in this broad bill is?
So our primary concern is the measures on a register of children not in school, which is a major section of the bill which will require a lot of detailed information from parents who are home educating their children, has some implications even for churches and Sunday schools as well. So we're particularly concerned about that.
Detail. Give us an idea. What kind of details are we talking about? You brought Sunday schools in there. What on earth could that possibly have to do with government legislation on schools?
Yeah, so this is a requirement for parents whose child is not in school to tell the government, or tell the local authority, I should say, how many hours each parent educates the child, who else is involved in educating the child, what their address is, how long that goes on for. So that obviously could include Sunday schools, if a home educated child is going to a Sunday school.
So if I have my daughter is older now, but it could have been the case that if I were home educating her, that I would have to be given the details of her Sunday school teacher, which was on a rota, so that could be multiple people over a course of a month. All of their details would have to be passed on to the local authority.
Yes, potentially. I mean, a lot of this, if the bill passes in its current form, which we hope it won't, but if it does, a lot of this will come down to the detail in regulations, in guidance. Is that going to be the address of the school, of the church? Is that going to be the address of the individual teachers? We don't know, to be fair.
Phenomenally intrusive.
Yes, very intrusive.
I interrupted you, carry on.
Yes, there are other issues in the bill that we're concerned about, and other things that could be introduced through amendments to the bill. Because it's an education bill, it's going through Parliament. Anyone who wants to make an amendment can put one forward. So there's a range. There's amendments on online safety, on smacking, on religious education and collective worship, on parental complaints, on guidance for schools, on gender questioning children. Possibly there'll be some amendments still to come on relationships, sex and health education. So there's a whole range of things. Some of those amendments are positive, some are negative. So all that's in the mix as well at the moment.
We're going to come back to smacking a little later on, but let's sort of take a little bit of a step back. You mentioned RSHE in there, and tell us what the trajectory of sex education in broad terms in the UK. Education is devolved issue, so there's going to be difference. But in broad terms, what is the trajectory? Are things getting better? Is there greater awareness of the need for parents to be to see the materials that are involved in sex education, or is it? It's been well publicised that Stonewall and Mermaids and organisations which have had a massive influence in schools have got some financial difficulties. Is there room for optimism? Or are you seeing things continuing on a downward trajectory?
I think there's some very cautious optimism. We have definitely seen some changes for the better in government guidance. So for England specifically, we had some improved guidance that was published last year, which schools have to implement from this coming September. Not everything in there is good, and certainly not what we would want. But definitely some steps in the right direction. But that's just what's written on a government document. It doesn't mean schools will all follow it to the letter. But many schools in England will have to be changing their policies, reviewing their policies this year ahead of this coming September. And the law requires them to consult parents. So it's very important for parents to look out for that, or even to ask schools, what are your plans for these new requirements? When will you be consulting parents?
And we can help with that if you need any assistance in that regard. John and his team are doing phenomenal work every day in terms of helping not just parents, but teachers, head teachers, governors. So do get in touch. Details are available on our website.
And there's a similar story in Scotland as well. There's new RSHP guidance, relationships, sexual health and parenthood education guidance. It's been in development at least since early 2020. There was a public consultation in 2023, which many of our supporters will have responded to, as well as we ourselves. We finally got a report on that consultation last year, but unusually we didn't actually get the new guidance. We were promised it by the end of last year, but it's now 2026. We still don't have it. But there are developments there. So there are pressures, it's fair to say, from, like on all these issues, from both sides. People who are pushing for more transparency with parents, who are pushing for a more conservative approach. There's been lots of controversy in the media that's helping with that push. But of course, people on the other side are also pushing back, and the government's in the middle of this, trying to work out how to navigate things. So we're going to get some things that are moving in a good direction, some things that are moving in a bad direction. But I can't stress enough, we can do things in terms of trying to be part of that conversation with government, but a lot of it comes down to individual school decisions, and parents really have a very important voice in that.
Yeah, so just to stress that point again, get involved as much as you can in your child's school. If you need some advice, John and his team are available. John, we haven't said anything in our discussion up to now about the Republic of Ireland. And of course, the Christian Institute is operating in the Republic of Ireland, albeit in a much lesser way. Tell us about the rollout of SPHE, lots of acronyms for people, the rollout of SPHE in the Republic of Ireland.
Yes, so SPHE is social, personal and health education. And again, it's not that dissimilar actually from in the UK. We've had a new curriculum at post-primary and the junior cycle, that's the first 3 years of post-primary, that's almost finished rolling out. But there are still be some post-primary schools working on the rollout of their senior cycle curriculum for the upper years in post-primary. And then in primary schools, we've got the new wellbeing curriculum. The law in the Republic of Ireland requires schools to teach these subjects in consultation with parents. And the best time for that consultation to be happening is when schools are still making their plans for how they're going to deliver this. There's a wide scope for schools to make their own decisions within the curriculum that's set out for them. So again, it's really important for parents to be involved. So again, ask. It doesn't need to be confrontational. Just ask, what are your plans? Just interested. I know the new curriculum's rolling out. When are you planning to consult parents? Try to encourage schools to consult in a really meaningful way.
That is one of the things that you really like to encourage parents to be conscious of, is the positive influence that they can have. It doesn't always need to be a negative thing, doesn't always need to be a complaint. They have the opportunity to get involved in a really positive way.
That's right.
We've got lots of resources on this. They're available on the screen just now. John, could you stick around for a little bit, because you talked about the smacking element of the Children Wellbeing and Schools Bill, and I want to turn to that now. I'm back with Simon and Dave as well. It's an issue. It's already been criminalised in Wales. It's been criminalised in Scotland, and there's discussion about, or pressure to criminalise it in England and in Northern Ireland. We've recently produced a couple of reports. This one, does smacking contribute to negative outcomes for children, which looks in detail at a lot of the evidence around the apparent harms, or what are pushed as harms of smacking, which generally turns out to mean that actually if you give them a loving smack within a warm, loving family environment, there's evidence that can be positive. And we don't need to go too far to look at the real effects in life, because of this report, the effects of the smacking ban in Wales, where it's been in place for a couple of years, tells us the reality of what it means to criminalise this form of parental discipline. So Simon, you've been close to this. Let me start with you. What would you have to say just in the round about the issues that are presenting in England and Northern Ireland?
So in the Parliament at Westminster, in the House of Lords, there is an amendment there. That amendment, actually, what's been interesting is to see the extent to which the smacking ban lobby appear to have maybe lost a bit of confidence, and I'd like to think the reports we've produced have sort of helped with that. Initially, they were looking to immediately change the law to criminalise smacking. Then they were looking at giving the government power to criminalise smacking in the future. Now, their amendment is just asking the Westminster government to look at what happened in Wales and to do a report on it. What has happened in Wales sadly, has confirmed many of the predictions that we were making from 2017 onwards during debates about criminalising smacking in Wales. What it shows is that there's a huge increase in parents being drawn into social services. That means a huge extra burden on social services. And put simply, if a social worker spends half of a day investigating a family where there's nothing wrong except mum has tapped the tot on the back of the hand, that half a day cannot be used by the same social worker to help a family where there really are problems. The other thing that's become apparent is that Wales has operated a non-prosecution policy, and parents who are deemed to have broken the new smacking ban instead get sort of sent to a kind of re-education course. That's over 100 parents a year. That's over 100 parents a year who, if the law was enforced like a normal law, would be being prosecuted, would be being hauled up in the courts.
Now, this is really important because the argument is we've changed the law and no parents have gone to prison.
Yeah.
So it must be fine.
Yeah, that's right.
But when you get underneath that, and you don't have to try too hard to get underneath it, you see this whole other story.
Yeah, I mean, I think, frankly, the Welsh Government probably could see that it was going to look very bad if, after all of their denials, because they denied that changing the law was about criminalising parents, up and down. And if it had come to pass that 100 parents a year were being prosecuted, that would have looked very bad for them. So they've taken this non-prosecution approach. But those 100 and odd parents a year still are deemed officially to have broken the smacking ban. The fact that they've been on this kind of re-education course, it could well turn up on any DBS checks. So that's 100 parents a year who, if they have a job working with children, you can forget it. It does have still very serious implications for them. And so and actually interestingly, the Welsh Government issued its own report on the ban. And number one, they admitted that there were kind of backlogs in social services as a result of the change. And then number two, interestingly, they didn't really try to estimate the cost. We have actually had a go at estimating the costs. How much is it? And I think it's £1.6 million a year additional costs, and that's the cost that we know of. So I think it has been much more expensive than the Welsh Government predicted, much more damaging on the work of social services than they prepared to admit, much more damaging on families. And so at Westminster, I hope the government will do a report on what's happened on Wales, and I hope that they will look and see that it has not been the rip-roaring success that the Welsh Government would like you to think. And I think in Northern Ireland too, there is an amendment.
Yeah, so just to break in there. So
sure.
The Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill is what is affecting this issue at Westminster.
Yeah.
Separately in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, so Children Wellbeing Bill is the bill that people have chosen to try and table an amendment on smacking at Westminster. In Northern Ireland, yes, there is an attempt legislatively to bring in a ban there. That's going to be debated probably not till sort of later in the spring. And so there's time, there's opportunity for Christian Institute supporters to be able to contact politicians, and we'll be doing everything we can to help people to get across the reality of what changing the law means. Because let's just go back to it. Banning smacking means removing a defence called reasonable chastisement. It means taking activities that have long been regarded by the courts as reasonable, like a mum tapping a tot on the back of the hand, and saying, even though that's reasonable, we're going to make it a criminal offence. You only have to say that to realise what a terrible idea it is.
Absolutely. Well, so we started talking about Northern Ireland there. Let's stick with Northern Ireland because, as I said earlier on, we work in England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And Dave, there's some elections coming up in Wales and Scotland. There's a prostitution bill being considered at Holyrood. There's the prospect of no-fault divorce in Northern Ireland. Where should we start? Let's start with the elections, Dave, in Wales and Scotland.
Yes, sure. So elections are scheduled in Wales and Scotland in May this year. So that's an opportunity for Christians to engage with that process, to speak to their candidates, to ask questions of their candidates, to find out where they stand. And we always say it's really important that Christians do take their opportunity. It's a tremendous privilege and responsibility to vote. that we have, and we'll be producing, as usual, our election briefing for Scotland, looking in some detail at the parties that are putting forward candidates and some of their policies on key issues that are important to Christians. And we'll also do something for Wales, not quite the same detail, but certainly laying out the biblical principles that we should be thinking about as we approach elections.
Okay, well, I did say that we were going to stick with Northern Ireland a few moments ago. So let's pick up the issue of the proposals to make divorce much easier. In fact, to go for the model that exists in England of no-fault divorce.
So that was one of the things that was consulted on. It wasn't, that consultation wasn't necessarily putting forward a preferred policy. It sort of consulted on a variety of options. And what was interesting when the results of that consultation were reported on a few months ago, it was clear that about 80% of respondents to the consultation felt that fault should remain in the law in one form or another, so that no fault was definitely not what the public wanted.
And 2/3 didn't want the law changed at all, did they?
Absolutely right, yeah. So a strong rejection of really the proposals there, and many of the respondents clearly articulated that the danger of going down this path that we really undermine marriage and the family.
Yeah. And there's a justice issue here, isn't there? If you remove fault from the wronged party, has no sense
recognition
of
that in law.
done.
Yeah,
that's right.
So just one more thing that might be worth saying about Northern Ireland. Last year we had the Supreme Court ruling on collective worship and religious education. I mean, it's really important we don't misunderstand that. Actually, it's still schools still have to. RE still must be based on Holy Scripture. That's what the law says. They can still in the main teach Christianity, but some changes are going to be needed. So we're waiting now for some more from the Department of Education this year that will guide schools on how to respond to that ruling. So that's a really critical thing in the year to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, John. I mean, it's really important that people understand the fact that teaching Christianity hasn't suddenly become outlawed by the courts. No, thank you for that. Let's go back to Scotland. There is a members' bill there on prostitution, being tabled by Ash Regan. Dave, the problem with this bill is so there's a good aspect to it, isn't there, which is that it criminally sanctions purchases of sex, but it does essentially endorse its sale.
That's right. So this is what's called the Nordic model. So you have criminalisation of the purchase of sex, but decriminalisation of the sale of sex. And we go with it as far as it goes to criminalising the purchase, but we don't think it's necessary to fully decriminalise the sale. There are ways. The problem is that people are trying to be sympathetic to the many people that have been exploited and trafficked into prostitution, but there's a way to have that empathy and to have an approach that focuses on saving those people from what they've been trafficked into and not prosecuting them, that still doesn't have a wholesale decriminalisation of the sale of sex. So we think the bill's got the balance wrong. We were expecting that bill actually to be debated, the principles of it to be debated at stage 1 this week. But that debate seems to have been put back. The committee that's considering it, the Justice Committee, is trying to come up with a stage 1 report, and that's clearly proving trickier than they thought it might do. So that stage 1 debate will be delayed. It's looking difficult now for that bill to get through in time before the elections, even if it does pass at stage 1, which is by no means guaranteed either, because there are lots of competing interests on this.
Okay, well, we're nearly done, but before we finish up, it's probably just worth saying a few words about the Republic of Ireland. John, we've already heard from you about the rollout of SPHE there. I mean, another significant issue for us is that the Irish company On Institute Christi, the Christian Institute Ireland, is seeking charity status, and would appreciate your prayers that would be approved. God willing, that will happen this year. We'll be continuing to do more meetings and inform Irish Christians about what's going on in Ireland. In fact, we've just got our first meeting in Waterford County coming up as well. In other things that we have going on, Dave has mentioned the election materials that will be going out for Scotland and for Wales. We're also hoping to finalise our gambling documentary. That's been a really big issue for the churches that we have been going out to in 2025. Many of them hadn't considered gambling from a Christian perspective. So hopefully that will be with you as well. And there'll be a whole lot more besides, which, I mean, we have probably only covered a subset of the things we'll actually be dealing with. But as I said at the start, we remind ourselves that the Lord God is in control. Well, let's leave it there. Thank you, Dave, Simon and John. And so if you want to know more, you can sign up to our mailing list where we'll keep you up to date, as well as invite you to Christian Institute meetings in your area throughout the year. If you are new to the Christian Institute, go to our website, christian.org.uk, to access a whole host of resources and more information about what we do, and to learn how you too can be a Christian influence in our society. Please do be praying for us this year as we seek to work for the glory of God and for the good of His church. Thank you for watching.
For more great content, like, subscribe and hit the notification bell.